This is Geometry Unit 1, Lesson 4 on quadratic equations. Since in the last lesson we talked about linear equations and inequalities, in this lesson we're going to review how to do a quadratic equation. Now, a quadratic equation would look something like this. 2x squared equals 9x plus 18. I know it's quadratic because its highest exponent is 2. And not only does that tell me it's quadratic, it also tells me there are actually two solutions to this. There are two values of x that will make this equation true. All right, now there's many different kinds of quadratic equations, so let's take a look at some of them and how to solve them. The first one is a pure quadratic equation. It just has an x squared in it. It has no linear x terms. You know, there's no other x here except for the x squared. So to solve this, we solve it like we would normally solve for x. Use basic operations to get x squared alone on one side. Well, this is 2x squared, so in order to get the x squared alone, we have to divide both sides by 2. And that gives me x squared is equal to 9. So since this is x squared, how do we undo the square? Well, you take the square root of both sides. So I do the square root of x squared and also the square root of 9. Okay, because the square root of x squared is just x. However, remember we said there are going to be two answers here, since this is quadratic. When you take a square root, there's actually two answers. So you have to use plus or minus, because one answer will be positive, one will be negative. The square root of 9 is positive or negative 3. 3 squared is 9, and also negative 3 squared is 9. So that works both ways. So it's plus or minus 3. There's actually two answers. Most of the time when we're calculating in geometry, we only use the positive answer, but you should be aware that there's a negative answer as well. All right, so let's try this next quadratic equation. We have 3x over 4 equals 6x plus 9 over x plus 8. Well, technically this is really two fractions that equal to each other, so what do we usually do? Well, we cross multiply. Cross multiply here, cross multiply here. All right, so that gives me 3x times x plus 8 equals 4 times 6x plus 9. Notice I'm using my parentheses so I can see exactly what I've got to multiply. All right, to solve your equation like you normally would, distribute 3x squared plus 24x equals 24x plus 36. Okay, so what happens to the 24x's? They cancel each other out. Yeah, so you minus 24x on both sides, and you get 3x squared equals 36. All right, so now I need to get the x squared alone. So what do? I would divide by 3. And that gives me x squared equals 12. And then I want to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus. And you get x equals plus or minus the square root of 12. I'll put that up here. All right, now, is this in simplest radical form? That may be asked for. So we want to see if we remember how to break down a 12. And a square root of 12, I'm sorry. So what perfect square goes into 12? Well, 4 does. This is going to be plus or minus. 4 times 3 would give me 12. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 is a perfect square. What is the square root of 4? It's 2. So x is actually going to be plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3. This is actually called simplest radical form. The radical can't be broken down any farther. And that means that this is an exact answer. Now, the square root of 12 is also an exact answer, but it is not simplest radical form. Okay? When it's exact, you want to make sure that the square root stays in the answer. Okay, if you were asked for an approximation, or to round something off, all you have to do is put this in your calculator and round it off. And so if you grab your calculator, second, x squared, 12, and you get about 3.464. So that is approximation, is when you round it off. All right, so this is not exact. If you were asked for the exact answer, you would leave it in radical form. All right, now let's try solving quadratic equations by factoring. These are usually when we run into trinomials. So let's take a look at how we do this. All right, so first of all, we want to put the equation in standard form. For a quadratic equation, standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So when we see the quadratic, you want to start with highest exponent first, descending order, and equal to 0. A, b, and c are constant numbers. They're actually the coefficients on the x squared, the x, and the c. All right, and the first a can't be 0, obviously, or it wouldn't be a quadratic. All right, once you get that equal to 0, like this is here, highest exponent first, descending order, equal to 0. Factor it. Factor means box or reverse FOIL. However you like to do it, double bubbles or the box. I'll kind of do both at the same time so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, so do your box. Make sure it's equal to 0. Here's my box over here. All right, so x squared we know is x and x, because x squared here gives you x and x there. Okay, is this going to be, for argument's sake, is it going to be same signs or different signs? Well, this is negative on the end, so if negative 16 goes here, we know that one sign is going to be positive and the other one's going to be negative. So keep that in mind when you're doing the box. Okay, so now since this is just x squared, all we have to do is find the factors of negative 16 that add up to be negative 6. All right, so the factors of negative 16 add up to negative 6. How about negative 8 and positive 2? Let's make sure that works. 2x minus 8x. If I add these together, I get what I need. So this is going to be minus 8 plus 2. You can do smiley face check if you need to. All right, so once you do the box or reverse FOIL, however you like to do it, set each factor equal to 0 and solve. This bubble is one factor, this bubble is the other factor. Set each one equal to 0. Don't skip this step, make sure you do it. All right, and then solve each one for x. We'll move the 2 over, this becomes x equals negative 2. And move the 8 over, and this is going to be x equals 8. Quadratics are quadratics. It always is the same process. 2x squared equals 9x plus 18. This is the one from the beginning of the lesson. All right, first thing we want to do is solve it by factoring, is get it in standard form and equal to 0. Now, do we want to move the 2x squared over here? Probably not, because factoring negative 2x squared is a pain in the neck. So what we're going to do, instead of moving the 2x squared, we're going to move these two and make it equal to 0. So we're going to minus the 9x and the 18 at the same time. So that gives me 2x squared minus 9x minus 18 is equal to 0. Okay, I can't GCF any of this. There's nothing that goes into all three of those. So this is going to have to be guess and check bubbles or make the box. I would probably make the box on this one because it's a little bit harder one. All right, so we have 2x squared here. We have negative 18 here. Now remember, with the extra step here, you have to multiply these two together to get negative 36x squared. Okay, now I need the factors of negative 36. That will give me negative 9. Now what multiplies to give you 36? Well, there's lots of things. If I'm not sure, I can grab my calculator, quick trick. Do whatever you're trying to find the factors of, divided by x. Negative 30, whoops, too many negatives. Negative 36 divided by x, and go to your table. All right, so here's my factors. 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12. 3 and 12 probably would work if I get the signs correct. So if I want to get this to be negative 9, it would have to be negative 12x and 3x. So negative 12x would go here, 3x would go here. It doesn't really matter which box you put it in. All right, then you want to do your GCF up and down and left and right. So GCF across this way between these two is x. Your GCF up and down, if this is x, this would have to be 2x. 2x times x is 2x squared. All right, that means my GCF down here, notice these are both negative, so it's going to be negative something here. 2x times probably going to be negative 6. It's got to go here. And then negative 6 times what is negative 18 would be positive 3, and that's also the GCF between these two. So my factors are 2x plus 3, x minus 6. Now, if I set each of those factors equal to 0, I'm going to get something a little bit different. Because of the 2x plus 3. Now notice this one is just going to be x equals 6 because when you move the 6 over, you get that. What kind of number are we going to get here? Well, we move the 3 over. That gives me 2x equals negative 3. Divide by 2. You get x equals negative 3 over 2, or negative 1.5. So you can have a fraction answer. Most of the time, if you have a larger coefficient polynomial here with a bigger than 1 in the leading coefficient, then your answer might be a fraction. Most of the time it will be some kind of a fraction. So yes, you can have a fraction answer. Okay, so bigger polynomials with the bigger coefficient here, probably want to use the box, or you can do guess and check with your bubbles. All right, so we have another two fractions set equal to each other. Probably what are we going to do? Cross multiply. All right, so make sure you multiply everything and write it down so you can see it. This is going to be 2x plus 3 is going to multiply by x plus 2. I'm going to have to FOIL that or box it or however I want to do it. And then I have to multiply 2 times 5 here to end up with 10. So this is going to be 10. This I have to FOIL, or I can make a box over here on the side. I'm going to FOIL it so you can see what I'm doing. 2x squared plus 4x plus 3x plus 6. Okay, combine my terms. 2x squared plus 7x plus 6 is equal to 10. All right, is this in standard form? Nope, it isn't. To get it in standard form, we have to subtract the 10. So we minus the 10 here, it goes with the 6. That gives me 2x squared plus 7x minus 4 is equal to 0. Now I'm going to have some bubbles here, so and it's a bigger coefficient, so I'm going to get my box going over here. Or you can do the factors, however you like to do it. All right, so this will be 2x squared. So this one would be minus 4. So the a and the c term go in those two boxes, multiply them together. Okay, so for these two boxes, I need to know the factors of negative 8 that add up to be positive 7. Well, there's only two sets of factors, and only one of them adds up to 7, so it's probably going to be 8x and negative 1x. So I'm going to put those in my boxes and take my GCF up and down and left to right. Okay, so left to right here, my GCF between these two boxes is going to be x. So that means the GCF going this way, if this is x, this would have to be 2x. Okay, so this would be 2x, this would be x. So one of them's going to be x, one's going to be 2x. All right, so then this one, notice these are both negative, and there's nothing else in common. So the only GCF here is going to be negative 1. Remember, x times negative 1 is negative x. All right, and then the GCF across the bottom is going to be 4, positive 4. If you're not sure, 2x times 4 is 8x, and then negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. And these two have to add up to be 7x, and that's what we want. All right, so that gives me 2x minus 1, x plus 4. Set each factor equal to 0. And this one is going to be x equals negative 4. Move the 1. 2x equals 1. Divide by 2. X is equal to 1/2. So 1/2 and negative 4 are my two answers. All right, last one. 6x squared equals 4x. Quadratic equation, it's got to be equal to 0. So the first thing I've got to do is move the 4x. So we have 6x squared minus 4x is equal to 0. Okay, now notice this is not a trinomial. There is no 3 terms here, and there's no perfect square. So it's not a difference of squares, and it's not double bubbles or a box. All right, now do we notice anything else about these numbers? Okay, this is the last problem. We have 6x squared equals 4x. All right, so 6x squared equals 4x. First thing we want to do is get it equal to 0. So that gives me 6x squared minus 4x equals 0. Okay, so we can divide out 6 and 4, we'll divide by 2, so divide everything by 2, including the 0. That gives me 3x squared minus 2x is equal to 0. Okay, so this is not a trinomial or perfect square, so we only can do reverse distribute on this. So it's going to be x times 3x minus 2 equals 0, and then set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So x is going to be 0 as one of our answers. The other one is going to be x equals 2/3.